I'm David Hunt, and welcome to Ben TV. My guest today, the powerhouse. She's amazing. Starting off, a mixed race parents, grew up in Logan in Queensland, Bachelor of Visual Communication Design, worked in Indigenous design agency, postgraduate museum studies, come on, it keeps on going on. Finalists at Telstra in 2018, Telstra National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Art Awards. Went to London for a couple of years, of course she did. While she was there, ended up uh, as a recipient of the 2019 Australian Council of Young Emerging Dreaming Award, sorry. And then while in England, the Museum of Oxford Queering Collection. Coming back to Australia, like nothing, nothing is normal with this girl. She's so brilliant. She was on the first flight that was cancelled due to COVID. I moved to Melbourne with her partner, who is an ICU nurse. Also signed as an artist with Mars Gallery and curated her first show for Craft Victoria. Appointed on the board of Craft Victoria just recently. Congratulations on that. And she also has pieces in the new gallery at the Victorian Pride Centre. And she's currently working on a body of work as we speak. Whoa, and I didn't even cover all the things because there was too many, and I'm sure we'll get to a few more of them as we talk. I am talking about the one, the only Jenna Lee. Hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. So lovely to hear someone talk so enthusiastically about my life.
Well, you've achieved a lot. We've got to start. When I interviewed you about a month or so ago on Sunday Arts Magazine on Joy 94.9, your family, the mixed race family, tell our viewers, because this is fascinating alone.
So I will kind of go into it, and it's quite common in the north of Australia. So my father's side, we're Asian Aboriginal, so Larrakia, Karajarri, and Wardaman, Chinese, Japanese, Filipino. And my mum's side, we're Anglo-Australian. And all of these kind of, overlapping cultures are due to a couple of, fairly significant moments that happened in Australia's history. And the first one was the pearling industry boom that happened in the north of Australia when they found the largest species of mother of pearl shell off the coast of northern Australia. So that brought a lot of people to the north. And then also the White Australia policy, which made pushed particularly Asian and particularly Aboriginal Australians kind of to the fringes of cities and societies. And so, of course, they, fell in love, intermarried, had babies. And yeah, my Anglo-Australian side of my family, my mum's side is, that classic Irish, Scottish, migrant family. So it was a very colourful upbringing and very vibrant, and kind of one of those things you sit back and you reflect on family customs. And with us, you don't really know which culture it has come from, but it makes for a lot of fun.
And siblings? Have you got any brothers and sisters?
I do. I have three younger siblings. One sister in the Navy, one sibling who is a poet, and another sibling who graduated high school last year. So yeah, a very queer family as well. I have one straight sibling, and she's in the Navy. And so it's a really, we're very multicultural, but also very queer. And I've often, spoken to my parents about what an amazing job they've done to raise three of four, children who are completely comfortable in their sexuality and their gender identity. And so we kind of have the joke that the one straight sister is the black sheep of the family.
So coming out, like how did it happen for you? When did you realize, and telling your parents? And especially considering you the eldest of your siblings, was that really challenging, or you felt really comfortable about telling your parents?
For me, it was a really non-event because my parents have just always been so incredible. I have aunties and uncles on both sides who are gay. And so one day I was just sitting in the car with my mum, and I just said to her, "Oh, I'm dating someone." And she was like, "Okay." And I was like, "It's a girl." She was like, "Okay, what's her name and when do I get to meet her?" And that was actually my current partner, Annie, who is, the first girl I've dated, and we have been together for 8 years now. So it was kind of a fall in love with the person. Gender was never you know, a checkbox for me. It wasn't something that I wanted one or the other or any in between. It was just falling in love with a person.
You've mentioned to me off air that you moved around a lot as a kid. How traumatic was it for you, or did you embrace it and really enjoyed it?
I think younger, I really loved it. And my family, we just move around because, my parents love adventure a bit and, just want to
Okay.
move on to the next thing. And so younger, I really loved it. I think high school was probably the hardest, and that's,
Yeah.
just a part of being in high school. But also we moved from Darwin to the Lockyer Valley, which are just really culturally different, just completely different types of places. The Lockyer Valley is a farming region just outside of Brisbane, probably hour or so out of Brisbane. Whereas Darwin is obviously an incredibly multicultural, tropical place. And so it was really interesting going from, being one of many, many Indigenous students at a high school to being possibly one of, you know, three or four. So it was a bit of a culture shock, I think. But kind of helped shape who I am. And I think there's probably a chance I would have come out a little bit earlier had I not been growing up in regional Australia for those kind of, years 10, 11, and 12. But, I don't regret, being out there. And it's just a different lifestyle, and it's great to experience all of those things.
When did you realize that you liked art and you had a passion for art? Was it a little kid, or did it come a little bit later?
It was definitely as a child. I'm really lucky. My mum is a high school teacher. She's a trained home economics teacher. And so growing up, we were always kind of doing learning and making as a part of growing up. And it was what we did to entertain ourselves. But also, fortunately, and I was really lucky to be in a position where my mum was a stay at home mum as well for, the first 16 years of my life. So we did a lot of making. We were probably fairly late adopters of technology. We never had any of the game consoles or anything like that. So it meant that making was probably what we did the most. So art has always been a part of my life. And it's, yeah, kind of something that I can't imagine not doing.
And where did you actually pick up the particular style that you do? Because you're quite unique and quite different to most other art, aren't you? And like, which is refreshing, because you're actually making your own style, your own way. And like, tell some our viewers some of the things that you've done, especially books. What you do with books.
Yeah. So working with books, I kind of look at a book as an object that contains materials. And so I work with books that, with our modern, understandings of Aboriginal culture, would be considered inappropriate or racist, or didn't include the right people. So I take these books that, and some of them were published after I was born, so they're not old books always. And I break them down and use their materials to rebuild into new. I work sculpturally with paper. So when I say, I'll often say I'm a paper-based artist, I think people think works on paper, which, like printmaking or drawing, which I do as well. But primarily I work like sculpturally and with it as like an installation material. And it's, again, taking it back to childhood. My mum very early on worked at a Japanese paper store as a
Ah,
salesperson, and learned a lot about paper. And so we grew up with framed sheets of paper around our house. So we always knew that paper was beautiful. And she also knew how to make recycled paper. And so we had little hand paper making kits at home, and we would do that as a Christmas activity and make cards. And so one day I was at the Lifeline Book Fair in Brisbane, with a friend, and she picked up this awful book written about Aboriginal people actually around Darwin. She said, "Oh, you should turn this into art." And I bought it that day and I took it home and I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't want to repeat the words that were in it. The words could be really hurtful.
Mm.
And so it was about a year later that I worked out, well, I could make new paper out of it. And that's how I started working with paper.
But then you also weave the paper and use it like a reed to make actually baskets.
Yeah, and I started off working with paper and pulping it and sculpting
Yep.
it. So I didn't start making flat sheets of paper. I wanted to make objects of cultural significance. So to take something that was written about us, without us, and turn it into something that we would make. And so I was making basket forms with pulping. And then one day I was like, there has to be a way to make string out of this, strong enough string that I can weave with it. And so I have been weaving now for about probably a year and a half, and have finally gotten to the point where it's very clean and it's a really beautiful outcome. And I use two materials. I use the paper, which I make string out of, and then I use a bookbinding linen as the other string to kind of stitch it all together. And for me, essentially using bookbinding materials, what I'm attempting to present is a rebound book. I don't add anything a lot of the time to the materials I work with. I just alter them in a way that they can tell a new story. So I work also with old silverware, old furniture and things, but I don't actually change them completely. I just alter them so they say something different.
Being an artist, it's always a tough road financially, and awards is something that you have to go after to get money and finance, and also to lift your profile. How do you find that? Do you enjoy that process, or you think, oh, here's another prize I'm going to have to go in for?
I think it's twofold. I love it because I actually have a background as a graphic designer before I was an artist. So I love a deadline and I love a brief. I find that I can work really well when there is a due date and when there is, a purpose. And when I was first starting out and didn't have exhibition opportunities, that was the only way to have a due date, was to set yourself goals for entering awards or submissions. So I used to just submit for anything I could. And, you don't have a hugely successful, rate when you're first starting off, but slowly over time, the ones that mattered were the ones that I would put energy into. And also, a lot of these awards have entry fees. So you do have to really start picking and choosing what you do enter. Because it's about what you can afford. It's I guess it's a tiny bit of a gamble, paying the entry fee. But fortunately, a lot of the awards that are for First Nations artists often don't have entry fees. So that's something that I do really encourage, First Nations artists to really look at awards, because often there's very little risk. And at the end of the day, somebody in the arts is going to have looked at your work, whether or not you become a finalist. There are panels who select works. So either way, someone has seen it. And I've actually had opportunities before where I've missed out on an award, but a curator has seen my work and thought, oh, actually, she'd be perfect for this.
Fantastic. A great little message out there for everyone. Now, let's talk about your partner. 8 years. How did you meet?
It was at university. I lived with one of the guys that she went to high school with, and we're still very good friends, all of us. And we were just mutual friends for a couple of years before. And, it just started off as, going out, to clubs together and things back in the day when we could all go out dancing and drinking and having fun. And yeah, it just evolved over time into kind of more. And we moved in together after that, and then moved overseas together, and just, moved to Melbourne together. And it's just been a relationship that I think we're both completely different from the people we were when we met. That happens when you meet when you're 20. But, it's a growth that has happened alongside each other, which is really wonderful. And we moved here because my partner got a job here. And it's been such a wonderful move for me. And just knowing that, wherever we go together, it's, going to work.
You moved here to Melbourne because of her job. What was the reason to move to London?
We really wanted to see the world, wanted to travel. She wanted to nurse in another country, and being primarily English speaking is really important. You need to be able to communicate with your patients. So there's not a lot of countries that it's English only system. So the UK seems like a really good opportunity. And for me, it was to access museum collections, or at least see them if I couldn't access behind the scenes, see what they did have on display for myself, and was really lucky that actually I sent out cold call emails to every anthropology museum in the UK that had Aboriginal objects, and the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford got back to me because my artist bio mentioned that I was a queer artist, and they were in the process of planning Beyond the Binary, which is their Queering the Collection show, which is currently on, and was meant to launch while I was still living over there, but COVID, of course. So I've seen lots of wonderful photos, and it's a really great exhibition.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because I was going to mention it. What sort of an exhibition is it? Tell us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting exhibition, and in that they spent a lot of time engaging and connecting with the queer community in Oxford. And Oxford's a university town, city, I guess, and so it is generally more progressive, and lots of different people from all over the world. So they spent a lot of time working with the community, and I worked with them in that I did museum collections visits and got to handle objects. And then I created work based on those visits around, identity as a First Nations queer woman, and what that means, and also the history of collecting, the English Empire way of collecting. Often was this very binary: it's a men's object, or it's a women's object, or it's it's a weapon, or it's a tool. Like it, what they were hoping to do was show a bit more fluidity in also the cultures that they had been collecting.
Okay, it sounds fascinating. And are you happy to be part? To be part of that. Was it something you walked away from and thought, "Yeah, I'm so pleased I did that"?
Yeah, I had a really wonderful experience, and museum spaces can be um, ones of discomfort as a First Nations person, because the way that objects were collected often have very awful, horrible stories attached to them. Um, the maker's name is never attached to them. Very rarely is the actual place or people it was collected from. There is a lot of information on who collected it, but so it was a little bit hard in that when I said I was interested in Larrakia objects, which is where the traditional owners of the Darwin region, they were able to pull out objects that could have been associated with the Northern Territory. So, that's the Northern Territory is a really big place, and culturally we're very diverse. So that it always is a little bit hard, and that's not the fault of the current staff. That was just the history of collecting that they're working with. But having done museum studies postgraduate, I walked in there feeling quite well equipped to understand all the histories and understand the context I was walking into. And I also spent a year working at the Queensland Museum alongside incredible curator Imelda Miller, who's the curator of the Pacific and the Torres Strait. And I just asked her one day how she takes care of herself in these really hard spaces. And that was a really great conversation to have in, what do you do to make sure that culturally you feel safe in spaces that actually aren't? So, I spent quite a few years making sure I was equipped to work in museums in the UK, knowing its history.
Right. All of a sudden you're back. Oh, I've got to ask you. Yeah, tell us about the flight back to Australia, the COVID flight. You're like, wow, that's news in itself.
Yeah, so I came back for an exhibition opening for an incredible show, which was a group. I think there was almost 15 or so artists who were responding to the 250 year of Captain Cook. which was, in early 2020, and 2020 was going to be the year of that kind of anniversary. And so I came back for it because it was an incredible show and I was really proud of the work that I did. And I was here as COVID was starting to break. And then I had a flight back to London, and it was one of the first flights back that was cancelled. And it was the best thing that probably could have happened to me,
Oh,
because I got stranded in Australia, as opposed to stranded on the other side of the world. I had
yeah.
a 2-year visa. I didn't. There was no way I was ever going to get sponsored. So for me, it was just a big relief. I had 6 months left on my visa, and my partner, because I was in Australia, when Scott Morrison got on the television and said, okay, all Australians need to come home, 3 days later, she was home. And we were just so lucky to be in a position where I rented a studio space. And so we moved all of the clothes and home stuff into the studio space. And I later got professional removalists to just go in and put it on a cargo ship and send it over to me. But we were just in that really lucky position where, and because we did it so early, the landlord let us break lease, because, again, it just hadn't kind of hit London yet. I don't think the realization that this was going to be a pandemic in, I guess, the West as well. So it,
Mm.
yeah, was probably the best thing that could have happened. And then we
Wow.
spent 9 weeks in Brisbane before moving down to Melbourne.
Okay. Now, here you are, you're in Melbourne. So much has happened for you since you've been here. How long's it been that you've been in Melbourne?
Just over a year. I moved here, I think,
Whoa.
on the 25th of July. So just a year and a month. It's been I, finished up my part-time job as a graphic designer at around the same time that I moved down. So it's been a year of working full-time for myself, as an artist and as a graphic designer. So it's been a year of me working out how much I can actually take on. I've gotten better at saying no. I just get so excited. I love making and I love designing and I love making art. So it's really hard to say no to opportunities when they come into your inbox, but I'm getting better at it.
So how do you choose? Like as you said, there's lots coming into the inbox. Because has there been a couple of occasions where you've gone, oh, I should have taken that plunge, I should have done this, but obviously not because of the wonderful year and a bit that you've had here.
Yeah, and I think for me, design was the easier one to start saying no to. I know what type of design work I want to do, and what type of clients I want to work for. It's very rare that I have to say no, but at the same time, I have a really wonderful network, or know a really wonderful network of other First Nations graphic designers. So clients are often coming to me for something specific, for a specific project, and there's more than enough work to go around. And so it's really lovely. We all do pass on work to each other. I'm primarily a book cover designer and a typesetter. So I often will get people I know sending those type of projects to me. And if other people are coming to me for, branding work or things like that, I can send it on because, we've all got our strong suits.
Yeah,
So it's about sharing that work around.
yeah, yeah, fantastic. Here you are. You're like Mars Gallery. They represent you. You were in an exhibition when I first spoke to you at 45 downstairs. You're part of the gallery space at Victorian Pride Centre, and you curated your first exhibition for Craft Victoria. Now you're on the board of Craft Victoria. That alone is massive in just over a year.
It is, and I actually worked it out. I think I had 3 solo shows in the span of about 6 months to 8 months. So I had one in Sydney at First Draft. I had one at Mars Gallery. Um, one was pushed, so it'll be 3 solos in a year. My next one is at Mackay Art Space Mackay, which I'm currently finishing off works for. So yeah, it's been really busy, but I am just so happy to be making art. It is my job, but also my hobby and what I enjoy doing. So for me, it doesn't seem so much like work. There will be the stress in the month beforehand of worrying that I don't have enough artwork for the space, or that how will the work be received. There's also always that pressure, but the lead up to and the coming up with new ideas is just so fun. And I really love it, and I'm finding that people are responding to my work in a really wonderful way, in a way
Yeah.
that I'm hoping I'm presenting a simple and important concept, and people are responding to it, and it's been really wonderful.
Being on the board of Craft Victoria as an artist, what an honour. And you're like, is it a bit daunting?
It is a bit, and they're really amazing. Craft Victoria has two positions on the board, who are maker members. So Craft Victoria is a membership organisation, and which I've been a member of since I moved to Victoria. The other maker member is Abby Seymour, who is a jeweler, phenomenal jeweler, and so we represent the views of the maker membership. And the board is an incredible group of people who have just such amazing industry experience. And Craft Victoria also are very conscious of the fact that this is a development opportunity for the maker members. So for me, it's about learning how a board operates, how I can best contribute to a board, and also see how organizations work and all the different facets, but also make sure that the members' voices are heard and are always present, because that's who the board serve. But they're an amazingly passionate group of people. I've been to one board meeting so far, and it was a really nice, all on Zoom, of course. But I just people who are passionate about they're not artists themselves and not makers, but just passionate about supporting the arts and supporting the craft sector, is a really wonderful opportunity.
And as you said, like what you're going to get out of it, all the experience and having an understanding of the working of galleries and all different disciplines within the arts, but also standing up for the arts as well on that level. So congratulations on that. Now let's talk about how did you get involved with Victorian Pride Centre? How did it come about?
So Mish was the one who reached out to contact me, but she actually contacted a good friend of mine, artist Lisa Webb, and we were attending a year long jewellery course, which that's the other exhibition that's opening. Hopefully on the 4th of September, we've got an exhibition. All the participants of this black design jewellery intensive have works showing. And Lisa and I were in this workshop together in this intensive, and she of course knew that I identified as a queer woman. And so when Mish contacted her, their friends, and said, do you know of anybody? Lisa kind of came over and said, oh, is it okay if I share your details? And I thought, absolutely. And yeah, a few weeks later, I was having an iced coffee with Mish desk down from where the Victorian Pride Centre would soon open, talking about my practice and my life. And I made a new body of work for that show, specifically thinking about identification and adornment. And it's really lovely because it's actually a direct evolution from the body of work that I did with the Pit Rivers. So it was just really nice to be approached to kind of work in this, in creating work that was specifically about, my identities. And it was just a lovely opportunity to expand that. And I actually got to collaborate, or got my younger sister Mackenzie, who's a poet, who is also queer, to write poetry in response to my work. And then I printed it on paper made out of the same books that I had made the adornments out of. So I just wanted to bring family back into that and start talking about queer families a little bit. And she's just such a talented poet. And just the words, she's just about to turn 21. And you read the poems and you wouldn't know a 21-year-old wrote them because they're just so profound in what she's picking up. And so I then kind of adapted my works to respond to her words. And we've worked together a few times now. And I think it's just such a wonderful way of working together, is to work with family. It's just really lovely.
Absolutely. Now, the jewellery exhibition, is that at the Koori Centre? Is that the one?
At the Koori Heritage Trust. Probably it will open digitally on the hopefully the 4th of September, and then it will be on until February. So we are hoping that sometime in between September and February we are out of lockdown and we can all go in and see it then.
It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. There's so much more we could have talked about, and congratulations on your incredible career.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me come and chat with you. It gave me a wonderful reason to get out of my pajamas during lockdown. So thank you for that. It's been really nice.
Pleasure. My pleasure. I'm David Hunt, and this is Ben TV.